Bitcoin in the midst of 4 straight days of losses, with crypto becoming a major issue in this presidential election. Where can we expect the price to go from here? Joining us now for more is Anthony Pompliano, founder and CEO of Professional Capital Management. Anthony, it is good to see you. So you look at Bitcoin here, we're down about roughly 5% in August. We've kind of been trading in this range, Anthony, roughly 50 to 70,000 for months. What do you think breaks us out of this range, Anthony? Would you be looking to a Fed cut in September? Is it election volatility? What's on your radar?
I think there's 3 main things that will break us out. First is time. People are away for the summer. We kind of go sideways historically over the summer. When people come back, they sit in front of their computers and they start buying assets. And so I think that Bitcoin will be a beneficiary of that action. The second thing, obviously, is a Fed cut. As cheap capital comes into the market, you should see some of that capital flowing into risk assets like Bitcoin for people on Wall Street, and you'll see price kind of break out. And then the third thing is I do think that if former President Trump is reelected, there's a lot of folks who are kind of looking at him as the pro-Bitcoin or pro-crypto candidate, and I would expect Bitcoin to rally on his reelection as well.
What would change your view on that, Anthony? If, we know, for example, that Harrison Walz had their first network interview this evening after announcing her campaign for presidency. What could she say in that interview that would make you think that she is the pro-crypto candidate?
I don't think anyone in the Bitcoin and crypto industry cares about words at this point. If you're sitting vice president, then you can do action, right? And I think that's really what people are looking for. And so if people believe that the current administration has been abrasive towards the industry, I think the most powerful thing that Vice President Harris could do is to start to take actions to support the industry, show rather than tell. And I think the same would be true if it was a Republican in office. At this point in an election cycle, both candidates are going to say a lot of things, but the average voter really can only take those words as perceived empty promises. And so the advantage that Vice President Harris has is she can not just talk, she can act. And so if she was able to take 1 or 2 different actions that showed she was becoming more sympathetic and kind of pro-Bitcoin, pro-crypto, I think it would really help her election campaign.
Anthony, isn't that the SEC? Isn't that their purview?
I think that obviously regulators are a big piece of kind of what happens in the United States, but there's plenty of stuff that the president could do. Some of it could be via executive action. Some of it could just simply be coming out in support. One of the things that I don't think people have given enough credit for to former President Trump is he actually held a meeting with Bitcoin miners, and he sat and he listened to them. And so, again, it was behind closed doors. It was attached to a fundraiser. So there was definitely incentives for him to do it. But sitting in a room and listening to these people is pretty powerful. My understanding is that there was recently a private meeting of crypto executives and some congressmen and senators that were on the Democratic side, and they wanted to talk about crypto, but Vice President Harris didn't attend. And so, again, obviously politicians are busy. They've got a lot of stuff going on. But I think part of action could just be showing up and listening. And so, again, I do think that Vice President Harris has an advantage in that she's in a position to act, whereas former President Trump is kind of on the outside looking in. But let's see what happens. We're still 2 months or so away from the election.
I'm curious, Anthony, when you're talking to friends and family, and maybe they're curious about investing in Bitcoin, and they're asking you why they should, what do you tell them, Anthony? What's the reason? Is it for the trade, store of value, medium of exchange? What's the reasoning?
Usually I just ask them, do you think the dollar is going to be worth more or less in the future? Almost no one I've met thinks that the dollar is going to be stronger in the future from a purchasing power standpoint. And so immediately they start to think, well, where can I go to get some sort of economic security for the hard-earned wealth that I've been able to accumulate? And there's many assets that you can go buy. You can go buy gold, you can buy Bitcoin, you can buy real estate, you can buy stocks. And so each person's situation is different. But I do think that there is a cohort of people and a growing cohort, hundreds of millions of people around the world. They want something that is a store of value that leverages sound money principles. It's an asset that's outside of the legacy financial system. No one can create more of it. But also they don't want kind of the existing physical gold, which is simply kind of trading sideways. Gold just hit a new all-time high, but it's only up 50% since 2012. And so you can think of Bitcoin as gold with wings. It gives you that same downside protection, that same kind of purchase power protection, but it also has the asymmetry of an asset that is compounding over that same time period at about 62% compound annual growth rate for the last 10 years.
Gold with wings. I need that on a T-shirt, Anthony. That's a good one. Let me ask you this. What about ETF adoption? Just switching gears a bit here. I'm curious to get your take on the launch. Flows have actually been relatively strong, Anthony, even when you see price declines. What does that tell you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people want access to this asset. What's unique about Bitcoin is historically technologies are adopted by kind of militaries first, then countries, then corporations, and then individuals. Bitcoin has been the reverse of that. We have seen the individual adopt it first. Eventually, we got some corporations and financial institutions, and the promise is that we're eventually going to get countries and militaries to participate as well. But I do think that right now, as we see those financial institutions, those corporations, and kind of larger family offices want to allocate to the asset, the ETFs provide a really low-cost liquid way to do that. And so they're going to continue to buy. Now, of course, prices go up and down based on buyers and sellers. And so there's more sellers than buyers, but that doesn't mean that the folks who want the ETF are going to go away. It just means that there's more people selling than buying, and maybe they're selling in the spot market while these folks are going and buying the ETFs.
To what extent, Anthony, do you worry about government sellers of cryptocurrency? For example, we saw that this was a headwind for the price of Bitcoin when Germany was selling off their holdings a little bit. Is that something that investors should be looking at moving forward?
Imagine being able to tell your grandchildren that you bought Bitcoin sold from a government. That's what I think. And so if the governments are going to sell it, I think people are scrambling to be the ones to buy it. Historically, the Bitcoiners have usually talked about things like, hey, don't be the Bitcoiner that sells your Bitcoin to Wall Street. Don't be the Bitcoiner that sells your Bitcoin to a nation state. But now when these governments go and they are offloading Bitcoin, somebody's on the other side of that trade. And so while it's somewhat of a meme, it's somewhat of a kind of funny conversation, I do think that there's a lot of people who say, hey, if these organizations, these nation states have Bitcoin and they're going to sell it, I would love to be on the other side of that trade. And so, there's a persistent bid. Obviously, hundreds of millions of people around the world believe that these sound money principles in digital form are very valuable. There is a very strong holder base of Bitcoin. More than 50% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in over a year. And I think that this asset will continue to do that for the years to come.
All right. Anthony Pompliano, thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate your insights. Thanks for coming back with us.
You got it.